Welcome to the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society. Welcome to ITSPmagazine. You're listening to a new Redefining Security podcast. Have you ever thought that we are selling cybersecurity insincerely, buying it indiscriminately, and deploying it ineffectively? Perhaps we are. So let's look at how we can organize a successful InfoSec program that integrates people, process, technology, and culture to drive growth and protect business value. Knowledge is power, now more than ever.
Imperva is the cybersecurity leader whose mission is to protect data and all paths to it with a suite of integrated application and data security solutions. Learn more at imperva.com.
Asgardio by WSO2 is a developer-focused identity and access management solution. Offered as Identity as a Service, or IDaaS, Asgardio by WSO2 creates seamless login experiences to your apps in minutes.
Marco.
Sean.
I was up all night building new features for a cybersecurity product.
Yeah. New stuff, new ideas.
I had some really innovative dreams the nights prior, and I thought I'm going to take entire life savings and build this new product.
Because you want to be the first on the market.
I want to be the first on the market. I don't know if anybody wants it, but
you know.
it's going to be cool. Guess what it's going to have? AI. Yeah, it's going to be AI. It's going to be ready, quantum ready.
Yeah, and how about trust? Zero?
Metaverse.
One trust, zero trust. What's going to happen?
That's right. I'm joking, of course. I've already done that experience of putting life savings into a venture, which was a fun thing. But in all seriousness, I can joke about building a product and having it be technology focused and hoping to create or find a market for it. I think there's a lot of reality in that, though. And we've had many conversations here, Marco, talking about features versus products versus solutions versus ecosystems that one or all of the above can solve a problem or not. And how easy is it to apply them to solve the problem, and how expensive is it to do it? There's lots to talk about. And that the future can be bright if we put our mind to it. And we have somebody who's been doing that for quite some time. He wrote a book. We're going to talk to him today about the future of cybersecurity and some of the innovations. And
forget the book. He's already been on the podcast before.
He's been on the podcast.
That's what is relevant.
Exactly.
We talked about the book.
That's his claim to fame. Or our claim to fame for him is that he's on our show.
We know that guy. That's how it goes. Now, honestly, I'm very excited to have this conversation. I remember it was a lot of fun. And we will connect, obviously, the two podcasts together. But today, we want to look into the future using your experience. And by your, I mean William Kilmer. Welcome back.
All right. Thank you, Marco. Thank you, Sean. I appreciate that. First of all, I enjoyed the last session so much, but I think I should get a shirt that says "I survived," Sean and Marco.
And then makes it sound like we're horrible people.
No, not at all. Actually, it was such a great experience that that I volunteered to come back on again, readily. But first, Sean, I have to say you had me. I was sitting here as you were talking about your startup, and I was adding up the valuation as you went. It was like, AI. Well, that's at least 50 million for an early stage company. Metaverse, yeah, definitely another 25 to 75 million there, and onwards. We were thinking about how much we could put in and how much your company was worth already. So,
well, I'm gonna take that for a moment before I let you introduce yourself, because I came at it purely from I have something cool to build, and you approached it from how much is it going to be worth. And I joked about the idea that it actually did something meaningful. I don't know. I'm going to leave that there. Hopefully we get into some of that, where we are with things in that space. Before we do that, though, for those who haven't heard the last podcast, of course, we encourage you to do so. But brief word, William, about you, what you're up to. I know there's been lot of activity in your world since last time we spoke, and happy to hear what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Sean. So I'm William Kilmer. I am working on a number of different things right now, but actually I just made an announcement today that I'm joining a group called Gallos, which is a UK-based organization that's focused on early stage cybersecurity investing in startups, as well as creating a co-building platform. So if people have ideas or if they're interested in leading something and want to connect with other founders who have great ideas, we're willing to fund and help build those organizations. And to me, that's just really at the forefront of cybersecurity and looking at what's happening. Also, I should mention last time, we talked about an upcoming book that I've written called Transformative. It's really a general business strategy and innovation book. It's really focused around how great companies go from being challengers to market leaders. And in particular, focuses on 3 different areas, which I'm sure we'll incorporate maybe into some of our discussions today. But maybe going back to what you had said earlier, one of the things that we find with great companies, with transformative companies, in particular, they tend to target industries that already exist. They're big, they're open. There are opportunities that they know customers are there and buying, but their main point of focus is not necessarily product innovation, or technology. It's more about changing the outcome for the customer. Right? And great companies, whether you think about organizations like Netflix, for example, who took DVD rentals and broadcast television, they changed it into an entirely different outcome where you had literally libraries worth of on-demand first DVDs and then streaming movies that you could access at any time. To companies like Starbucks, who completely changed a cup of coffee that you brewed at home to a whole new experience of sitting in that third environment, sitting down and creating a new experience for customers. And I think a lot of those principles can be applied to cybersecurity today. If organizations in particular just focus on what is it that we want a customer to actually get out of this, what kind of experience can we deliver, and start thinking about how to build that versus, how do I add this new technology in or lay it on top of everything else that they have?
So how do you view things at the moment with respect to, I know obviously your book is very widespread in terms of, it doesn't matter what industry or if it's a technology company or not, to be transformative is to be transformative. But from a cybersecurity perspective, do you see that sector specifically being transformative, or are we kind of stuck in a cycle of iteration on existing things, serving an existing market, trying to find that little nugget of something that might help? And maybe back to my previous points that it's either technology driven, some engineer or architect found a cool way to do, a researcher found a cool way to do something, or an investor said there's money to be had because this new technology is coming and needs to be secured, so we need to build something for it. So are we transforming in cybersecurity, or are we kind of in a wheel of hamster wheel?
Yeah, I think for most of us, we don't know when we're on a hamster wheel. We're just keep going forward, and it looks like we're heading down the road from their perspective. And in a lot of ways, I think cybersecurity is like that. I think one thing I'd like to add in is that one of the things that I did recently was actually participate in an overview of the market, talking to about 40 or 50 people that were cybersecurity experts. And, this was across CISOs, investors, people who were recruiting and in, charge of talent, to, business leaders. And I think, what we heard largely was, number one, it feels like we're still in a very sort of incrementally driven market today in terms of innovation. Things that we're seeing are layering on top of other things, are, sort of marginally better than what we've seen in the past. But we're sort of on this precipice, I think, where, cybersecurity really needs to see a sea change. First, from a demand perspective, I think that the 2 most common things that I've heard, when I've talked to CISOs company leaders is, number one, cybersecurity is too expensive and it's too complicated. And I think, that's a big issue, that they feel like they're spending an increasing amount of their budget on cybersecurity, and they're not getting that much marginally out of it. And it's increasingly difficult to even know what to do next. And the second piece was, even though they feel like they've made improvements, they've improved their security posture, that when you compare where they are today to the adversaries, the criminals who are out there, they've made larger improvements. They've made larger progress. And in particular, we'd love to talk about this a little bit, but the use of automation, AI, how sophisticated some of the adversaries have become. Most organizations today feel like, even though they've invested more, they're sort of losing that battle. And I think that's a real issue. When we ask, are we in a phase where we're seeing things that are transformative? I think we have the potential to, which is why I said we're sort of on that precipice. If you think about, some of the directions that we're going today and the paths that we have, first, some of the platforms, things like extended detection and response, SASE, ZTNA. See, I got my first 3 acronyms out already. Each one of those is really not a product. It's not a technology. It's a framework. And it's really designed to be much more comprehensive than maybe the way that we thought about things, before. I mean, take something as simple as XDR, right? Extended detection and response. We've recognized that, the endpoint's important. We've recognized the network's important. Now we're seeing this bigger attack surface, and organizations, in particular cybersecurity solution providers, are starting to say, yeah, we need to bring all of that information in and create, a more comprehensive, informed decision on what to do, not give you pieces from each one of them to say, here's an alert on a desktop, here's, anomalous traffic that we've seen on the network. Here's something that we've seen where there's been, an attack on maybe a cloud instance. We're bringing all of that together to sort of help organizations understand what's happening very quickly. So I think we can really be at a stage where we're going to be transformative. But a lot of that is really going to depend on, having the right solutions in place, the right ones that are automated, the right ones that have, I think AI to assist organizations in making good decisions and responding quickly.
So, William, first of all, don't get me going with the acronyms, because that's a never-ending
acronyms.
Acronyms. That's a never-ending battle between me and Sean and all the expert. Because it makes me think like how, in a way, there is still this secret language and secret society about being in cybersecurity, that it's that business to business, expert to expert conversation. And the reason why I'm saying this is because I'm thinking about the example that you brought back about a company being transformative, which is not just selling a product. To me, it's selling a lifestyle, right? When you really embrace a brand and you talk about Netflix, it changed the way people are consuming things. Starbucks, same thing. I can think, in a way, Apple, Nike, when you really embrace a brand. And it's very hard for me to think like how cybersecurity is going to do that unless it become more of a B2C instead of a B2B, and then the B2B needs to adapt to their consumers. You see what I'm saying? It's like, how are we going into the mainstream in order to really transform? Otherwise, you're just adding another thing.
Yeah, that's a great question. Marco, look, I actually went to a show this week. One of the first ones I've been to live, and it was for managed security services providers. And, there were a lot of discussion there about XDR, for example, but most of the discussion was around, well, this is what XDR means to me. What is that for you? Does that include these components or, these other components? And I think what we need to do is step back a bit more. And this is one of the principles in my book that I talk about about outcome innovation. Great innovators always start with the outcome and work backwards, right? They always think about what is the solution that I want to have in place, and then how am I going to do that? And that generally, transforms the perspective, and it causes the organizations to really rise to, a challenge. And I'm going to go really, really old school here. Hopefully you guys will remember this, and a few of your listeners will as well. But, you think about Steve Jobs and, some of the things
I was just thinking about that.
He would put out there, right? Yeah, exactly. Think about, if you had an iPod, early on, what was Steve Jobs' challenge? It was, we're going to put 1,000 songs in people's pockets, right? It was very open. It was very sort of consumer experienced. And it left people's imagination open as to, what that would be. Imagine if we did that in cybersecurity, rather than saying, we're going to build and, we're going to bring together all these components, for a zero trust network experience. What if we just said instead, we want to build an experience where, where users that get on the network are those that are trusted, and those that aren't trusted, can't get on. Okay, how do we work back and make that solution work? Or, one of my biggest, I think, areas of interest is still around the small, medium enterprise, market, the SMB, maybe, under 1,000 employees, companies or organizations. If you could just sit down and say, how are you going to make this cost effective and simple enough for them to be able to use it, especially in a world where, things are starting to become more automated on the attacking side. You might come up with a different solution rather than, here's a bunch of things we can stitch together and sell to the small, medium business market.
I'm glad you went there, and I'm going to stay here for a moment, because I was just wondering, and you answered the question, if we're asking the wrong questions for what the outcome should be. Yeah, many conversations we have, we talk about the idea that you can't talk about the technology, you can't talk about the vulnerability, you can't talk about the breaches, all the stuff that causes fear and gets teams to kind of, I don't know, ruminate on how to solve a specific problem. And we're trying to move that over to, well, how does what you do not just protect the business, but perhaps even enable the business? And it seems we're kind of getting stuck in that point as well. And I'm wondering, even if we do ask the right question, what is the outcome that we want? And we do it in a way that's very open and gets people to think differently. Do we have the wherewithal to actually deliver on what we say is the outcome we want?
Yeah. I think this depends on a few factors. I think the capability's there. But for too long, we've sort of had this delineation in the market that, and a lot of it, I would say, is driven by, the venture capital model, the way that we see technology and innovation sort of cultivated. But, we have this approach that you're a software company, you're a services company. If you're a software company, your goal is to sell as much software as you can, sell it to as many people as possible, minimize your costs, which include, how much are you actually interacting with the customer, how much are they calling you, et cetera. And the approach that we've often taken in this market is, hey, we'll sell it to as many people as we can, but if they need help, well, then we want a consultant, or we want a VAR, or we want an MSSP, managed security services provider to run that. And they're kind of throwing the ball over the wall to somebody else to manage it all. And I think at some point in time we've got to change that approach. I think the other side too is, we need to require software providers to also step up. And I think we're seeing this increasingly in the market. But, we essentially, when it comes to cybersecurity, we've allowed people to build the roads, and we've allowed people to build the cars, and that's the infrastructure, the software. But it's not always secure, and it's not always safe. And then we're having a whole bunch of people, run around in the cybersecurity market trying to chase down everything and make it secure. So, imagine if we allowed, Tesla to sell you a car that doesn't have door locks on it, and it breaks down often, and that, somebody can come and, steal the batteries out of it. Now, we're telling you, yeah, you've got to go talk to somebody who can secure that for you. I mean, that's essentially what we've done in a lot of ways in the software market. And I think we're seeing that change, but that's been the approach for the last 20 years, and it hasn't worked.
Well, can I comment on this, Sean, very quickly? Because that's where I was going to go too. Like, are we just the one dictating what they want without really listening to the market? And I know you've talked to a lot of people in the industry, in the consumers. Like, what do they want? Because in a way, you can listen to, Henry Ford is like, people wanted a faster horse. I'm giving them a car. Now they all want a car because they didn't know any better. In a way, Steve Jobs did the same thing. It's like they didn't know they wanted it, something that was a phone and an MP3 player and a computer and all of that. And I feel like the cybersecurity industry has been kind of like driving this conversation and say, you don't know anything. Let me tell you what you need. I don't know how effective that is in the long run.
Let me try to answer that, Marco. When I think about what, some of the obstacles are, in the market today, I think about, sort of three things that are, that are out there. Number one is, organizations today are just in an asymmetric warfare, when it comes to cyber threats. They're going up against adversaries, attackers who are well-funded, they're protected, they essentially have no, constraints, and they've become more organized than ever. We're hearing instances of, sophisticated hackers who, sound like organizations, right? They've got, sort of the front end. They've got, a finance department that once they've ransomwared you, they send you over there to accept your payments. They've just got all of these different tools that are available to them, including AI now, that's making it more and more difficult. That's, I think, a number one issue. Number two is, as we know, there's just a lack of great talent out there in the cybersecurity market. You hear all sorts of numbers, but latest numbers I've heard are 1.4 million open positions in which there aren't qualified individuals for. And then, three, I would say, is it's somewhat self-inflicted both by, the customers and by the cybersecurity market, that because there's so much pressure to stop the threats, we sort of think about these incremental, here's another problem, we've got to focus on that. Here's another problem, we've got to focus on solving that. And, therefore, we just really don't have the ability to step back and think about how do we, reformulate and, come up with things that are much more transformative. So, it's difficult, in this type of market today where we're constantly thinking about what's the newest issue, what's the newest problem, to really step back and sort of, walk back in the door of a company and figure out what they really need and how to best, solve it, right? We're really generated by that, or motivated by those short-term concerns that they have.
So that, in connection to your previous point of basically we're building crap, right? And then we have to go secure it afterwards. I know there are things like phones that are built from the ground up to be secure. Are they going to compete with Apple and Samsung and others? I don't know, right? Probably not. They don't have the ecosystem there to make that happen, for example. Where do we go? What do we look at here? Is it the infrastructure needs to be redone? Do we need to get rid of existing operating systems and devices and start from scratch? Is it a wholesale thing like that, or is there an incremental path forward? And again, and because you're talking about talent, I mean, if all we're doing is exacerbating the problem and expecting more talent to come in and clean up afterwards, that's a never-ending battle that probably can't be sustained. So I'm thinking if we change the technology and we bring people in and swap things out, perhaps we fix that problem and the talent problem as well. I don't know. I'm curious your thoughts on how we kind of get out of the pickle that we're in.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Sean. And I think it does start, with the software providers. It does start with, the infrastructure providers to step up to a level of, security in what they're offering. And I do think that's happening. And it's probably not, it's not as dramatic as changing out an entire operating system, but it's really a willingness to buy into and adopt some of these features. I don't think you need to have a third, phone option, in the market today beyond, Android-based phones or iPhones. You look at what Apple has done, and I actually just wrote an article on this recently. It's on, it was published on Crunchbase's, news site, but talking about how startups need to embrace cybersecurity as an element of their strategy. And it exactly highlighted, what Apple has done with turning off application tracking. Their ability to do that and to offer customers a choice that apps won't actually track that, an individual across different applications was a boon. It put them in an interesting, very significant position versus software vendors, for one thing, the app developers, right? And we saw, organizations that had a significant drop off in application usage and revenue because they weren't able to track from others. But more importantly, they really catered to a market, giving them, a feature that people wanted to use. And I think whether it increased their sales or not, I don't think there's a lot of evidence that it did. It set them up and positioned them as the most secure, mobile device, let's say mass market mobile device in the market today. And I think that's an attractive position. There's no reason why, other organizations can't do that. The most secure cloud platform in the market should be a position that somebody would want to take, and across other markets as well. So I think it really starts with the vendors to begin with, to think about what is it that my customer wants? How do I, give them the most comprehensive customer experience? That's going to include security.
And it's a great point, because it's a delicate balance as well. I mean, is it the bigger question of, when you decide, am I going to go for it? Is it going to be a winning brand proposition, or am I going to lose the market? Am I going to lose the deal that I have with Google, for example, with the tracking and other things, or then I'm going to end up selling more advertising on my own platform, which is what apparently Apple is going to do now. And I'm also thinking old school, like when, Volkswagen went on the US market in the 50s with the Beetle, the Volkswagen, and they were selling, everybody was selling big cars. You need a bigger car, and they came with the Think Small campaign, which is probably one of the best campaign ever, and they got a big portion of the market. So it's like, who do we listen to? Our guts, our experience, or what the market, the consumer think they want? Mm-hmm. So maybe with all your conversation and everything, I mean, what have you learned? I mean, you're thinking cap on now, the future tinfoil hat, and tell us what you see.
Yeah. Thanks, Marco. First of all, for bringing up an even older example than the iPod. So I appreciate you.
I like the
Volkswagen example. So absolutely. So, I think one of some of the themes that we've heard, in terms of what needs to be done, in the cybersecurity market in particular, to provide better outcomes, in the future. And, as I mentioned, we talked to a lot of different people, venture capitalists, CISOs, industry leaders, company leaders, et cetera. There were a few things that we really heard that people were looking for as part of the future, and really, how things should go forward. The first, probably, and the most important one is that there needs to be better risk quantification and risk management. And this, I think, goes both for, separate vendors, who are looking at overall for an organization, but also there needs to be some level of understanding when somebody buys into new software or develops new software, what are the tools that they have to really determine what's the risk here? And I think the big issue that we're seeing, that we've talked to with people, is that digital transformation, sort of phase 2, which is really starting to orient itself towards digital transformation of the products and services, right? Phase 1 was sort of how do we get more productive? How do we reduce our operating costs by taking our workflows and transactions and turning them into digital ones? Now we're starting to look at, it's all going down into the business units, and it's focused around how do we give better customer experiences. Those are going to have their own inherent risks to them. And organizations want to understand, if I build a new product, if I have some sort of digital capability, if it increases a customer's footprint or attack surface in the market, how big of a risk is that? And I think any customer should be able to find that. That's really important. The next thing that we heard, particularly from CISOs, was this impression that, again, attackers are becoming more automated. They're using more AI, and that they needed to prepare for what we called the instantaneous attack. It's sort of a, push the button, everything just goes into place, and it's very, very hard to defend. They're no longer, APTs, and they're slow and stealth. They're very quick and, get in and kind of do the smash and grab, and they need to be able to manage that. The third was, how do we really focus on getting the most out of software without having to put more people, at it? So helping organizations to think less about SaaS and more about how is the customer going to manage this? Maybe that might be, they help with that. They decide to provide their solution as a managed service, or they're building it for service providers to be able to manage. Those were some of the key ones. And I will say last one, by the way, and probably most surprising we heard from people that we talked to was we want different business models. We don't just want, we've kind of progressed in this market from, license and maintenance, 15 years ago to SaaS. And we heard people saying, we want other business models besides just paying somebody a subscription for the software. And, we had all sorts of really, really interesting ideas that came out of that. But, to me, it was fascinating that people were looking for a different way to pay for the solution rather than just giving money to somebody who, is providing a SaaS solution, but there's really no basis as to, whether or not it's successful. There's no tie to that sort of success rate of the software.
And William, I'm glad you brought that fourth point, because I wanted to talk a bit about the budget. And I don't know if you have much insight on this point or not, but I mean, as the attack surface expands and business processes expand and the vulnerabilities therefore expand, that's my view of what's driving a lot of the new innovations. And so there's a new thing that needs to be protected, a new set of data that needs to be secured, a new process that needs to be fortified. And with each and every one, it's a new subscription, right? Whether it's an annual or a monthly or whatever it is, or an enterprise. I don't even know if they do enterprise licenses anymore or unlimited use of the stuff. But my point is, with each and every new thing that needs to be protected is a new product and a new line item in the budget. How do we innovate our way out of that growth that none of us like, I'm sure, except the people selling stuff?
Yes. Well, I think the industry solution is, buy it all from us and we'll sell it to you as a package, right? And I think that's where we're sort of going with, with our favorite acronyms, right? Like XDR, SASE, where they're just saying, hey, if you just buy all of the components and you buy us as a platform, you're going to get it for less, which in some cases may make sense. I think certainly, in the medium enterprise, that makes a lot of sense as well. But, I think there are different alternatives that are out there. And, when we did this survey and, came back and started thinking about models, we were actually pretty surprised at how many different models we could come up with. Probably the most, I think the most beneficial and maybe the one that is more positive in terms of building a positive loop is, more companies thinking about how to build more of a managed SaaS model rather than a SaaS model. So, you're putting software out there and you're offering it as a, software as a service, and you're asking people to pay a subscription, but you're giving it to them. And oftentimes they just don't have the personnel to manage it. The number of applications I can tell you where people told us, that's shelfware. Yeah, we have it running over here. Nobody looks at it because we just don't have the time. Or we couldn't, bring it into our SOC, our security operations center. There are significant applications out there that I think are 50% or more shelfware. But this idea that, maybe the service or the software provider is also a managed SaaS provider for at least some of their customers, that starts to get them in this positive innovation loop where they're thinking about, okay, if I have to provide people who are managing the software for my customer, that makes me start thinking about how do I simplify the product? How do I make it easier to use? How do I bring in more AI capabilities? Because that's directly affecting my financial position. And it's also helping the organization to better consume, the product. So I've seen it be successful where organizations are selling a managed SaaS solution where they are, sort of lightly managing their own SaaS software. And I think that's been super, super helpful. And I think there's, mutual benefits in that.
As we come close to wrapping here, William, I want to get your thought here, because you get to talk to a lot of people. Obviously, you did a bunch of interviews over the years. You've talked to a lot of folks. I'm sure a lot went into writing the book, Transformative. It could go two different ways. Examples of other industries. I know there's a lot around ESG, right, where they have probably similar challenges. There's a lot of stuff in place. This is how we work. This is how stuff is built, and this is the culture we've built around our businesses, and now we need to change to support a greener, more friendly society. Are there other, let's just stick here, I guess. Are there other sectors or industries that we can look to that have come across this challenge in a similar fashion and perhaps found a way out? Do you know?
Yeah. I think ESG actually is a really good example and a good model. We've progressed a lot, I think, as a society, and especially thinking about companies, for decades, right? We've been sort of on this, Milton Friedman model that, every organization's goal is just to, maximize shareholder return and profitability. And, in the last, I think, 10 years or so, we definitely have seen a rising ESG movement. Some of it's been, regulated or regulatory requirements, but a lot of it, I think, is just people recognizing that there is more out there than just buying a product, and that they're willing to, if not pay more for it, certainly switch to an organization that they think is doing more good or has less of a footprint and impact, a negative impact in terms of environment, social, damage, et cetera. So I think there's a big movement towards that today that really gives us an indication that, people are willing to pay for things that are important for them, beyond, product, but also that companies, in order to get on that innovation cycle, need to be willing to step up and maybe incur some more cost in order to make that available to them as a solution. And I would say that, the software industry today, the tech industry overall, is still more or less a profit maximization focus versus a, more comprehensive ESG. We see that right down at the level of software development. But again, to be optimistic, I think we're seeing that change. So, we're seeing a lot more movement towards, use of DevSecOps principles, development of code that is safe and secure. And in a lot of ways, we're trying to enable that other side of things that, organizations can lead the way and, hopefully position themselves as we are a secure platform or the most secure platform in the market, and that they'll get rewarded for that in some way, whether it's they may charge a premium, they may, get higher market share, but certainly I think that is a forward position, a lean in position to, from a product development and from a strategy perspective.
Well, lots to think about here, William. I don't know if there's a problem more challenging than the actual fight itself, but figuring a different way to solve that overarching problem is probably a little more challenging. So I think outcome in mind first, and not the outcome we ask ourselves, which is typically rooted in how much money can I make if I build something cool, or how can I use technology to do something differently. It's more of how, an open-ended, as you said, how can we accomplish something meaningful for perhaps not even just the business, but for the sector or perhaps even society. And thinking like that will really drive transformation, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the very most simple principles that I'll leave with you, for people who have innovative outcomes and really drive such transformative change, and this is one of the principles I talk about in the book, is they think about, union statements. How do I take what they have today and add something else to it that is significant? So just, the very most basic level of saying around cybersecurity, how do I provide them with the most secure solution and it is the simplest solution in the market for them to run, or the easiest solution for them to run. Just really can drive a lot if you open up your organization to that and allow engage your team and allow them to innovate. And I think we'll see some very significant changes and improvements in the industry, and hopefully we'll all become much safer because of it.
Nice. Well, thanks for that tip. And I know there are many more in the book, which we covered last time, and I believe it's coming out soon. So we'll include a link to that for folks to hear, to grab hold of as well. I mean, I have a gazillion questions in my head still. It's an interesting topic. I'm always trying to think, especially here on Redefining Cybersecurity on this channel, how to think differently about this problem. And I find myself getting stuck in some of the ways that I think about things, even as I'm trying to redefine it with others joining me. So this conversation was really good for me as well. And I appreciate it, William. And Marco, anything else?
No, great conversation. I have, gazillion of questions will be more societal related. And as you say, you should talk about redefining cybersecurity. You can get stuck in this container, in this bucket. And I think like this is about changing society as we change cybersecurity. So probably that's the next conversation, maybe, William, we can have. But I was very, very happy to be part of this. Thank you, Sean, for inviting me, and glad to see and talk to William again.
Yeah, great to have you on, William. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Let's keep redefining cybersecurity at its most basic but also meaningful levels. And there'll be links to the book, and I found the article on Crunchbase. We'll include that there for the Apple PC, wrote William. Anything else you want to share? And stay tuned for more.
Asgardia by WSO2 is a developer-focused identity and access management solution. Offered as Identity as a Service, or IDaaS, Asgardia by WSO2 creates seamless login experiences to your apps in minutes.
Imperva is the cybersecurity leader whose mission is to protect data and all paths to it with a suite of integrated application and data security solutions. Learn more at imperva.com.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Redefining Security podcast. If you learned something new and this podcast made you think, then share ITSPmagazine.com with your friends, family, and colleagues. If you represent a company and wish to associate your brand with our conversations, sponsor one or more of our podcast channels. We hope you will come back for more stories and follow us on our journey. You can always find us at the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society.